Appreciate you being here with us on Birds 365, streaming in with the Mac and Mac guys. We are lucky enough to get John's running mate at Sports Illustrated, Eagle Maven, Ed Kracz, up for a good couple of minutes of conversation today. All right, we got to get you to weigh in like everybody else has, and we still got more than 2 weeks to go. Man, the draft can't get here fast enough. To Bijan or not to Bijan at number 10? That is the question, Ed Kracz. How do you frame an answer to that question?
Well, I was on Bijan from, day one, really. He was in my first mock draft for the Eagles. How do I frame it? I think that he would be a great benefit for this offense, to be honest with you. I think he would help take it to another level, and it was interesting to see how Jeffrey Lurie talked about offense, really made a point of saying that this is an offensive league, and they like to score points, and he's right. Everything is tilted against the defense in terms of rules and whatnot. So, I think he'd be a great addition to this offense. And if he truly is the best player available at number 10 when the Eagles pick, I mean, why wouldn't you take the best player available? But that said, and, I don't think they're going to do it. I just don't see them taking a running back. There's just not a lot of value with taking one at that position, especially in a draft that does have other options at the position, good options that could come later in the draft. That would help this team, maybe not as much as Bijan, but it would help this team, no doubt. So I love Bijan. I think he's probably the best player in what I think is a draft that doesn't have a lot of star power to it. I'm not sure how many Hall of Famers there are going to be in this class, but I think Bijan Robinson probably is at the top of the list if you put it in that context. So, I think he's phenomenal, and I would love to see him, run, carry the ball, 15 to 20 times a game starting this fall, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
It's because where I am, Ed.
Yeah.
I mean, Howie's not taking a running back at 10, and it could be Jim Brown, the reincarnation of Jim Brown, and he's not going to take a running back at 10 in the modern environment. If things shifted, maybe we could revisit it down the road. But from his standpoint, the value's not there. So if he can get 800, I've used the money ball approach with Jody. If he can get 800 from Rashad Penny, 600 from maybe that's a little bit much, or 500 from Kenny Gainwell, the usual 250 from Boston Scott. Or you can insert name. Jody likes Zach Carbonneau from UCLA. If he's the lead back, getting 800, 900 yards. That's good enough. Plus, you're getting maybe an edge rusher, maybe Jalen Carter, maybe a really, really good offensive lineman. And that's sort of the equation Howie Roseman is dealing with. Is he right or is he wrong?
Listen, he came into this organization in the 2000 as an intern.
Yeah.
So he kind of learned at the knee of Andy Reid and Joe Banner and this philosophy of building within the trenches. And, he's not going to stray from that, I don't think. Especially when you look at edge rusher, like you mentioned, John, is who do you have there? You have Josh Sweat, you have Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, who's 35 years old, and then Derek Barnett, who is coming off an ACL injury. It's very thin.
That always perks Jody up, Derek Barnett.
Yeah,
he loves it.
Still on the roster, still on the cap,
still
unbelievably so.
Yeah, and I'm a big, I've always thought Derek Barnett was a good player for this team early in his career, and then kind of injuries caught up to him. But yeah, he had a very good rookie season. He just never really ignited from there. And that was a long time ago. That was 6 years ago. So, yeah, my point is that you don't have much there, whether you count Barnett or not. And edge rushers are hard to find later in the draft, in my opinion. Now, I know it's a good group, but you look at the top edge rushers last year, they were mostly first-round picks or early second. Chris Jones was an early second, but guys like Bosa and Myles Garrett and Hassan Reddick, they're all top 15 picks.
Yep.
There's the outliers of a Matt Judon who came in the 5th round, or Max Crosby for the Raiders who came in the 4th round. But for the most part, 1 to 15 is where you should find an edge rusher. And there are some in this draft that, could help in that regard. I like Nolan Smith a lot from Georgia. Lucas Van Ness has been in for one of the top 30 visits from Iowa. Miles Murphy from Clemson is supposed to be a good edge rusher. But, that to me is what Howie Roseman values. And then you look at the offensive line, another part of the trenches, and they lost 2 guys. They lost a starter in Ciamalo and a top reserve in Andre Dillard, who was also playing some guard in a reserve role last year. He just wasn't a tackle. So there's some guys there with versatility. I love Paris Johnson from Ohio State, played right guard as a 2 years ago with Ohio State. Last year he was a left tackle, so he can play both sides of the line, 2 positions. So that's to me where they're going to go. And Zach Carbonneau is certainly a good consolation prize, if you will. There are other players in this draft, I think, at running back that would help. But, you say Rashad Penny, 800 yards. That given his history of health, like that.
He's never done it before, but,
right,
he's been in the 600s.
And
with a bad offensive line. So that's what I'm going with.
But injuries, that's always the concern. The guy has not been able to stay away from injuries, and you have to factor that in when you start to make your decisions. And it was interesting, Howie Roseman at the scouting combine said, we're going to add at running back. And okay, he added Penny, he brought back Boston Scott, but is that what he was talking about? These are going to be our ads?
Well, no, he paid Rashad Penny $600,000. So, they could cut him and
sure,
not lose a second of sleep. So it's not that they're locked in, but it is, when he talks about those lottery tickets, that's the one that looks like the Powerball. Like if he does stay healthy, if they catch lightning in a bottle, he's already proven he can play. We've seen it from him.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can average 6.1 yards per carry behind at best pedestrian offensive line, what can he do behind a good offensive line with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts helping? I can see where he's trying to swing for the fences there. But boy, I got to tell you, Ed, could be Ed Kracz. They might get, you might not have the knees at this point, but I think anybody behind with Jalen Hurts in that offensive line, I can't worry about running back, especially when I have so many holes that I have to replace. You're right about Jeffrey Lurie, though, because, and that's where I want to go with you now, he kind of had like a defeatist attitude towards defense. He really did.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't do anything against good quarterbacks. That's essentially what he said. Are the Eagles too defeatist on defense? Like we're going to put it together with fishing wire with Nicholas Morrow and Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds and spend $3 at the Walmart clearance aisle? Is it too defeatist? And that's where I bring back to the top 10 pick. Get me some talent on defense.
Yeah, it was, and he made a good point, Lurie did, when he said, our 2 Super Bowl appearances, none of the defenses could stop the offense.
They could not.
They were both really high-scoring games. So, yeah, it's interesting if he's, sending the message from on high down to Howie Roseman and his staff that we need to build this offense, then they're going to go offense in the first round. And I'm not sure, it won't be Bijan Robinson, I don't think. Probably an offensive lineman, if that's Lurie's message. But yeah, you're right. They still got to run people out there to play some defense. And, if you don't have the right guys, you're going to put a lot of pressure on that offense to score 30 points a game. Now, the Eagles did that almost last year. They averaged like 28 point something points per game, one of the best in the league. But you still got to be able to stop people. And, to me, you're going to have to find a way to address linebacker, still not fully addressed. Morrow and Dean and who knows who else. That defensive front, it was fun. I'm sure they enjoyed watching that defensive front eat last year with 70 sacks. You lost a big piece. Javon Hargrave accounted for 11 of those sacks. Now, where are you going to find that kind of production? What happens if, Brandon Graham goes down again with an injury, or Sweat or Reddick? All of a sudden, who do you have on the edge to bring in? There really isn't any proven player on this roster. So to me, you have to find those pieces here in the draft, and whether they come at 10 or 30 or in the second round, I'm not sure what Lurie will do, but it was interesting, his comments about let's outscore teams. Let's play offense, because defenses have a hard time stopping prolific offenses. And he might want to make it a prolific offense. And he might tell Howie, hey, let's draft Bijan. He would make this offense prolific.
You're overlooking, both you and John, the number one reason why Bijan Robinson won't be here. The Eagles have Trey Sermon, who might be the greatest practice player in the history of the National
I should always
Football.
Bring up Trey Sermon.
Could knock me over with a feather when the coach was talking about him out there in Arizona. The way that he effusive praise that he gave. How do you not get him into a game? If this is the greatest, nobody can tackle him. You should see him in our practices. How does he not get dressed on Sunday? But I digress. I do want to ask about a defensive player that you mentioned. And in checking a couple of outlets today, had compilation of mock drafts and see who the Eagles picked and most of these educated guess mocks. And the guy who got more nods than anybody else was Nolan Smith, the defensive edge player from Georgia. You said you like Nolan Smith too. I don't dislike Nolan Smith. I think he's going to be a very good football player. I don't think he'd be a good football player for the Eagles, because I don't think you want both Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith on the same line at the same time, because they're two similar players. Undersized, playing the run, not a strength, pure speed guys on the outside. If I want a defensive end, if I'm going to get an edge guy, I'd rather have one that complements rather than reproduces what Hassan Reddick does. Why do you think Nolan Smith and Hassan Reddick will work together?
Well, I like speed off the edges, but you're right about stopping the run. If they're on the field, can you do it? I mean, people forget this defense was ranked, I think, 16th against stopping the run last year.
And that was with TJ Edwards.
Right. And that was with Edwards, and that was with Kaiser White. But yeah, two undersized guys. But listen, if you're on a third down, if you're in a passing situation and you're not going to run the ball and you insert Smith to go opposite Reddick, good luck stopping speed off the edge with both of those guys. You can leave guys in to, chip on them or a running back, but you have to pick your poison. Who are you going to block, Reddick or Smith, in my opinion? And why I like Smith to the Eagles potentially is that his comp is Hassan Reddick. And, Reddick has, he's got the size, the same frame, 6'2"-ish, 240-ish pounds, maybe a little lighter, 235. And Reddick only has 2 years left on his contract, right? So if you bring in a guy like Smith and, you groom him and you play him in the right kind of role, maybe he can develop into being a Hassan Reddick type player 2 years down the road. And again, Howie doesn't always look, at the year that's coming up when he goes into a draft. He looks long-term. He looks 3 years down the road.
Should you look long-term at number 10? The Eagles are usually drafting at the lowest in the high teens, more often in the 20s. This year, their actual pick, 30. Should you be taking? Oh yeah, we can take a guy we can just slowly develop, and he doesn't really have to hit his full top producing speed till year number 3. Can you really do that with the 10th pick in the draft?
Well, who would you take at 10 that's going to come in and play every single down?
I either a Skoronski, Miles Murphy. You hope that the Texas Tech kid falls down to you. I don't think that's happening. I would certainly take him as a freakish edge guy and plays a different type of edge than Hassan Reddick. I'm okay with going with the edge. The only guy I don't like is Smith, because I just think it's 2 repetitions of what you already have in Hassan Reddick.
But whoever you bring in on the edge isn't going to play, all 3 downs. You know what I mean? Because
nobody does.
Well, Bijan
Hassan doesn't play all 3 downs.
Bijan probably would. is my point. He's probably the only guy in this draft that you can bring in. And maybe you're right. Maybe an offensive lineman like a Skoronski could step in at right guard and play every down, or a Parrish.
That fans would love Peter Skoronski. That'd be so exciting. But it'd be a hell of a pick. But
yeah, I heard some conversation about his arm length. He's only got the 32 and a.
What are you talking to Grotz with arm length?
Yeah, right. He's he's a big arm length guy, but Paris Johnson's arms are over 36 inches and Skoronski's are only 32. I don't know what.
Well, Micah Parsons is a T-Rex and nobody can block him. So he's got little tiny arms and nobody can block him. So there's always outliers. And to me, the one outlier in this draft is Jalen Carter for a lot of reasons. Because I don't think if he didn't have some of the off the field stuff, and who knows, he was out of shape at his pro day.
Yeah.
Maybe that had to do with the stress over the legal stuff. I don't know. But I do know that he was the best player in this draft until all this started. And I saw on ESPN, and I don't know who it was, but they didn't quote them. They didn't get him. Was an AFC scout saying, boy, that looks like a Howie Roseman pick, Jalen Carter. That's a Howie Roseman pick. And we haven't talked about this a lot, Ed, but I don't think Jalen Carter's getting by Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does get by Seattle, he's not getting by Chicago. So the Eagles aren't going to get him at 10. Will they go up to get a Howie Roseman pick? And I agree with this AFC scout. If there's ever a Howie Roseman pick, Jalen Carter's that pick. Would they go up to get Jalen Carter?
See, I mean, why is he a Howie Roseman type pick? I mean, did he go into detail on that? Because to me, he's a red flag.
Well, he's a defensive lineman. Obviously, you're assuming he's past that. So you're assuming Dom DeSandro is, cleared him and Jeffrey Lurie's okayed it. So the assumption is he's on the board from a football perspective, is I think what he was saying.
Yeah,
that's an Eagles pick. This is a player the NFC champions shouldn't be in a position to get, but they have this unique opportunity to get who might be the best player in the draft. All due respect to Bijan. Seize the moment is, I think, what he's saying. Seize the moment. Will he seize the moment?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say I'm not as high on Jalen Carter as probably everybody else. And I wonder how much he loves football. Howie and Nick love guys that can ball. I'm not sure Jalen Carter loves to ball. I'm not sure his maturity level is a big question mark. Could he fit with a Jordan Davis and the Kobe Dean in a locker room where he was involved in that tragic accident? Good friends of Jordan Davis were killed in that. I talked to Jordan about that, and he was pretty beat up emotionally when those two friends of his were killed. And now it turns out that Davis may have been racing with them, or not Davis, but Carter. I don't know. But, to me, there's a lot of questions that Dom DeSandro and that security staff have to answer. But if he's there, he gets by Seattle, you want to trade up and get him. I don't know if the Eagles have the resources unless a team in that range is willing to take something next year, because the Eagles, we know, are going to have a plethora of draft picks. This year, they just don't have the resources, in my opinion, to move up. I mean, can you imagine Howie Roseman sitting on his hands from when they pick at number 94 and watching 125 players come off the draft board before they swing?
No, I think, but you can send 30 and move up, and you can add by trading down the second, third rounds. He's very crafty.
Yeah, but again, if you go up, you're going to have to give up that 30, right? You're going to have to give up 30, maybe probably something next year. I'm just not sure that's a good use of what they have available for a player that, in my opinion, has a lot of secure red flags that need to be answered. And I think it's a big gamble if they were to move up for somebody like that. Yeah, he has the potential for a big reward. But you have to make sure you're comfortable with that. If you're going to give up the limited amount of resources you have in this year's draft, when already you've got this wasteland on the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds where you don't pick anybody, Howie talked about how hard it was to sit on his hands after they took Carson Wentz second overall and had to wait to number 79 to take Isaac Seumalo. 77 players came off the board then. Talked about having to leave the room, the draft room, and being talked out of probably making a trade. I mean, imagine sitting for 125 players coming off the board. To me, if anything, he's going to trade back to try to get more picks in those rounds. I just don't see it being a good use of their draft picks or the resources in this draft to move up for Jalen Carter.
Yeah, see, here's why I have the problem with Jalen Carter and taking him. If you just look at the draft order right now, could Seattle use a guy like Jalen Carter? Yeah. Could Detroit use a guy like Jalen Carter? Do they have a desperate need elsewhere where they just have to fill quarterbacks up? No. So they could take him. Could Atlanta use a guy like Jalen Carter? Yeah, they could. Chicago could absolutely use a guy. So all these teams are going to pass on him. You've got to assume, as per an Albert Breer report yesterday, that some teams have completely taken him off their board. That they've found out something. They've come to a conclusion that this guy certainly isn't worth a top 10 pick. And the Eagles going to take him? Is it because the Eagles have just softened their stance on give us your tired, give us your troublemakers, give us your maniacs. We don't care. Just give us your best football players compared to other NFL teams. If they do that, then this kid better be a superstar, better keep his nose clean, because otherwise they'll be second guessed forever. I just think it's going to be a bad look if the Eagles take him and a bunch of teams who have legitimate needs for a star player like him at that position go ahead and pass on him. What do you read in the fact that Albert Breer is reporting some teams have completely taken him off their draft board?
Yeah, I would think that's going to happen. I mean, every team evaluates players differently. But yeah, that's telling that other teams. And you look at Howie Roseman, who doesn't like to reach for players that have that kind of a history. And, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. You're right. I mean, it's a high risk, high reward situation with Jalen Carter. To me, I question whether he actually loves to play football. I don't know.
Gotta love ball.
You have to love ball. If I'm going to trade up, I might. If Tyreek Wilson, if we see a first in NFL draft history, no, there has never been 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 9 picks of a draft. And if we see 4 quarterbacks go in the first 5 picks, and Will Anderson is that 5th pick, Tyreek Wilson's sitting there at 6. Would you trade up? I would go up for Tyreek Wilson maybe. But again, I just don't think with the resources they have available in this year's draft that they're going to be able to get up there and be able to add picks later on in the draft, because they only have 6 picks and 2 of them are in the first round. You're going to eat up that capital to go up for one player, when you have some other needs that you need to address, maybe not just for this year, but 2-3 years down the line when the bill starts coming due on other players like a A.J. Brown, like a Kenny Gainwell, when these contracts start to come up again. To me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can get a good player at 10, someone that can come in and do like Jody said and contribute right away, maybe play every down like an offensive lineman. Bijan Robinson, again, I keep bringing that name up. I mean, to me, he's the home run pick in this draft. And, the Eagles have shocked us before. They shocked us when they took Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. Maybe we're going to be in for another shock with Bijan Robinson at number 10.
They'll always shock us somewhere along, but it's usually the 2nd, 3rd round.
Yeah.
Tyree Wilson, though, you mentioned, he's the other guy, I think. And he's not as high profile, but if they're going to go up, that would be the guy. And Dave mentioned that. Dave Zangaro mentioned that as well yesterday. So that buoyed my thoughts about that, that he would be the other difference maker they might consider, and a targeted move up. I'm not saying going way up, a targeted move up like they did last year with Jordan Davis. Very small move up to make sure they get that particular player. If he starts to drip a little bit, you talk about that 2nd first round pick. If they don't move up, they don't move down, which I think you're right, Ed. It's more likely they move down than move up. I'm just throwing it in there for a potential difference making player. But if they're sitting there with 30 and it's coming down, and we all say, the Eagles don't take running backs since Keith Byers, they don't take linebackers since Jerry Robinson, blah, blah. They haven't taken safety ever in the first round of the draft. Brian Branch, Alabama. For this reason, one, you can call him a defensive back. You don't have to call him a safety because he plays just as much nickel as he does safety. They love those mirrored players, as Jonathan Gannon used to call them. C.J. Gardner-Johnson can play in the slot, can play safety. Avonte Maddox can play in the slot, play safety. You got another guy, Brian Branch. That, to me, fits like a glove. And he ran pretty poorly. At least, not for you and me, but for what he was expected. So I think he's going to be there. Well, the Eagles draft a safety, but call him a defensive back to get around it in the first round of the draft, Ed Kracz.
No, I'm going to say no. They won't do that.
I made my best case.
I know, and he's a good player, but we've seen other really good safeties come into this league before where we've debated whether the Eagles are going to take them in previous drafts, and they don't. They just don't do it. Again, I think edge rusher, offensive line that's the territory, but 30 is also the territory for maybe a Hendon Hooker, who probably is the 5th top quarterback in this draft, maybe even higher than that, but he won't go because of the injury, I guess. But if you're the Raiders sitting, in the early second round and you want to come up and get Hendon Hooker, you could look to come up to number 30 for the Eagles, and you get a quarterback who you have under contract for that extra year. I think that's a trade out territory for the Eagles, number 30 of the 2 picks.
I agree.
I think, if you trade out and you go into the second round and get an early pick, maybe Brian Branch makes sense there. But I just don't see them staying at 30 and taking a player like a Brian Branch. I just don't. I'm not even sure they would do it if they get an early second round pick. I just don't think that they just put that much value. You talk about their linebacker value. You talk about what Lurie said in terms of defense. I mean, I'm not sure they would invest a pick at a spot like safety if you can get an edge rusher, if you didn't address that at, number 10. And there are good edge rushers that you can find early in the second round. And that's more of a value, what they put their value in. So, no, I really don't think Brian Branch would look great on this defense. Good player from Alabama. We've seen Howie go to Alabama 2 years ago with Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. But I just don't see them drafting Branch anywhere in the first round, wherever they pick.
All right, Ed Kracz, need your opinion on this because we've asked everyone over the last several weeks, since almost a month since free agency really kicked in. Are you good with the Eagles wide receiver core right now, 1 through 3? Or do you think they need to upgrade at wide receiver 3 and push Quez Watkins down to 4? We know they lost Zach Pascal, and he was a specialized guy, very good at blocking, caught the ball when as infrequently they threw it to him as they did. Do you think they need better than Quez as their 3rd wide receiver in their 3 wide receiver sets? And if so, how you get that guy?
Yeah, I think they're fine with Quez at 3. Nick Sirianni said, listen, there's just not as many opportunities to catch the ball. And maybe Quez pressed a little bit, trying to make the most of those opportunities. But, 2 years ago, he had a really nice year. Nick Sirianni's praising him as one of the top, he could be a top wide receiver on any team. And he slipped a little last year. So I know it's not a popular opinion. I know people want to bring in somebody better than Quez, but again, he's on a cheaper contract. I'm anxious to see Devin Allen, to see if he is able to take that step after spending a year on the practice squad. Or not the practice. Yeah, he was on the practice squad. I'm anxious to see him. I just don't think, again, with the limited resources they have, I'm not sure they'll take one in the first 2 days. Now, maybe if you get into the 7th round and you haven't gotten any other picks, earlier on day 3, maybe I like a Tank Dell, that receiver. I think he's from Houston, a little guy, real quick,
Yeah,
really good.
He's not going. He's going to be day 2. He's not getting to day 3.
You think day 2? Well,
yeah. Oh, I think he'll be a second. I don't think it's a 3rd-round pick. If he gets to day 3, no later than the 4th. So the Eagles are going to have to acquire.
I'm still kicking myself on Marcus Jones. I tried to get the Eagles to draft him.
Went to New England.
Yeah,
went to the Patriots, right? Had a pretty good season.
Oh, tremendous. Plays receiver, cornerback, safety, punt returner, kick returner. Maybe the most versatile player in the NFL.
Well, I mean, maybe tell Tank Dell with the 94th overall pick. They do have that pick. I think it depends what they do with their first 3 draft picks. What positions they go to. But I personally think they're fine with Quez. They like Quez. They think Quez is fine. There's not a lot of opportunity for that 3rd receiver. You have to make the most of them. And maybe Quez tried to do too much with them. And it backfired on him, and he pressed and he struggled. He had the injury he mentioned that kind of set him back from a physical and from a mental standpoint. But they could look to upgrade, and how they do it, maybe they go with a receiver in the 3rd. I just don't see it. I think they'll try to bring people in as undrafted free agents. Again, they've done a good job bringing in undrafted free agents that have helped this team. TJ Edwards was one.
Yeah.
Britton Covey, who returned punts, was an undrafted free agent. I know a lot of people don't like him and think they could upgrade there. Maybe they could.
How could you not like Britton Covey? Maybe the nicest person on the planet.
Yeah, but again, you're thinking football, and you probably find somebody better. But again, taking a leap in his 2nd year, maybe he's a little bit better in his 2nd year. But I just don't see them with the limited resources they have going receiver until maybe the 7th round, and then of course in the undrafted part of the draft too. So
maybe it's because I remember Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore scoring touchdowns in the Super Bowl that I go, yeah, they got to get a better 3rd wide receiver than Quez. Game on the line, Super Bowl, potential championship on a. I got to get a guy who I'm 99% sure is going to catch.
Well, the Eagles don't use that kind of motion, so it's not going to matter, Jody, to have a manufactured player like the Chiefs use.
Understood.
That's another question.
They caught the ball, and I watched Quez drop too many balls this year and let someone pull it out of his hands for an interception.
Well, he would have caught those passes, but the Eagles aren't using that motion, which is a criticism of the coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff. Everybody obviously wants to kill Jonathan Gannon. All right, I'll leave it here at Kracz E. Follow Ed on Twitter, si.com/NFL/Eagles. We can't run back Aaron Cepas again, can we? Not after the Super Bowl. A couple of years ago, I was a big Presley Harvin guy. Steelers got him in the 7th round. Could they dare take a punter in the 7th round of the draft?
Well, I was going to say,
I don't know. I nobody knows names, but I mean, more positional. They need a punter. They need a punter.
I was going to say, if you're going to go down that Super Bowl road with Quez, you can go right down that same road with Cepas.
That's true.
I mean,
very true.
But I agree. They need to bring somebody in to compete with Cepas. I mean, he's just been kind of given a free ride as far as no competition in his last 2 camps. You got to bring somebody in to compete with him and try to wrest that job away. And this could be the year. Probably won't come in the draft, but maybe, again, another undrafted free agent type. I'm not sure. There might be a punter or 2 even still available in free agency.
I'm sure there are, but probably the Brett Kern types.
Right. So, and again, I haven't studied punter names because, again, it's 6 picks, limited resources. Are you going to go punter? I don't think so.
Well, you can probably get an undrafted one. Last year, the kid from Tulane, another big kid, big punters, he was undrafted. He was really good as a rookie.
Yeah.
Ryan Wright, I believe is his name. He was really good. So you can find undrafted kids, but they got to bring in competition, right? We're not going to,
I would think so.
Here's how the Eagles get their punter. The Eagles' undrafted free agent punter will be this year's Carson Strong. They will give him more of a signing bonus than anyone else will. They'll get the best of the undrafted lot. And there'll be 1, 2, 3 max punters who are drafted. So you should get at a minimum the worst case scenario, the 4th best punter in college football this past year. And the Eagles will get him because they remember how much money they gave Carson Strong? That didn't quite pan out.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that was one I got to take an L on because I thought that was a great move. Oh, this kid was going to be drafted. They got him as non-drafted. He couldn't play in the league. So I got faith in Howie that he's going to get the best undrafted punter by paying him the most money to sign. Kracz, we got to run. Always a pleasure, my friend. How many days till the draft takes place? What are you going to be doing the next 16 days?
Writing about the draft. I mean, what else is there to do? I can't, like you said, to start the show. I can't wait for the draft to start. Come on, let's get here and let's
well, hopefully we gave you some ideas. I'll be looking for that punting piece.
Special K, always a pleasure. Eddie, thanks for hopping on. We'll talk to you again next week or the week after. We're certainly going to get you on again before the draft. Thanks, buddy.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Ed Kracz, John's pen pal at Sports Illustrated, always does a great job when he jumps in with us here on Birds 365. All right, speaking of the draft, in hour number 2, we're going to have a guy who we're going to go heavy draft with, Emory Hunt. I apologize to Emory ahead of time. I honestly, John, you assure me we've had him on before. I'm getting old. I don't remember that. I remember Kracz.
Well, we've done over 500 shows, so it's
that's a whole bunch of guests, but a lot of them are repeaters. So shame on me. I can honestly say I don't remember Emory. I recognize the name. I've read some of his work. I don't remember him showing up there on Birds 365, but he will make his second appearance in hour number 2.
And by the way, Emory played running back in college, so I want to get his thoughts on not only
you'll have an opinion on Bijan Robinson.
Not only Bijan, but the devaluation of the position as a whole as a guy who used to play it. So it's
that's a good thing that you mentioned that, because you then have to take his comments in that vein, in that light, looking through that prism, that he's an ex-running back, and he's probably pretty pissed off that they've downgraded, devalued running backs in the National Football League. John McMullen Jody McDonald. Hey, do us a favor, hit that like button. Somebody put it on the stream, only 23 likes or something like that. You're watching the damn show. How much does it
like it?
How much
good draft intel here if you're paying attention?
Zippity doodah. We're working our what's off for you. The least you can do is hit the like button every once in a while. McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365.